12 days. That's all it took for 7 billion minds to become one, and for everything we used to call human to turn into something unrecognizable. For almost 2 weeks, this new collective intelligence, this living, breathing hive, searched for one answer. One impossibility. One crack in their perfect unity. Why were 13 people immune? Every scientist who ever lived, every doctor, every engineer, every researcher, every brilliant mind on Earth merged into a single being, a planet-sized thinker, a civilization condensed into one consciousness. And even they couldn't solve it, until Carol drugged Zosia. 3 days later, the hive had a breakthrough so disturbing that even they could barely speak it aloud. A discovery so intimate, so violent, so fundamentally wrong, that it made the entire unified mind recoil in disgust. And when Kumba finally told Carol the truth, he said only one thing. "We are not pleased with what we learned." But why? Why would a perfect emotionless collective show anger? Why would a being incapable of harming life suddenly freeze in place, terrified of its own solution? And perhaps the real nightmare is this. Did Carol hand them the answer, or did she hand them something far worse? Stay with me, because everything you think you understand about this episode, about Zosia, about the hive, about the immune, collapses the moment you look back at day 8. The moment truth serum touched Zosia's bloodstream and something inside her began to scream. Now let's begin. The disconnection nobody saw coming. For 12 days the world lived inside one mind. A planet where thoughts were shared instantly, where silence didn't exist, where loneliness was a myth told by pre-virus ancestors. And in that symphony, Zosia was a perfect instrument, connected, synchronized, inseparable. But on day 8, Carol asked one question too many. She wanted answers, she wanted weaknesses, she wanted the truth behind the immune 13. So she did what humans do when backed against a wall. She turned to chemicals. A truth serum. Harmless enough for an ordinary human. But Zosia wasn't ordinary anymore. She wasn't one mind. She was 7 billion. And that's when the impossible happened. The first fracture in the global mind. Watch the scene again. Really watch it. Carol asks, "What's the temperature?" Zosia replies instantly, 27.778. Not a guess, not a hesitation, a number pulled straight from a planetary intelligence. Then Carol asks about the wind direction. Zosia freezes. Her eyes shift. Her voice falters. She forces out, southeast, like someone reaching for a rope slipping from their fingers. Then comes precipitation. She can't say it. She can barely form the letter P. Her mouth opens and closes like it's forgetting how language works. We aren't watching confusion. We are watching a severed connection, a node being unplugged, a mind falling out of the collective and back into a single skull. Word by word, she's being pulled out of heaven and thrown back into isolation. And as her connection collapses, something horrifying happens. The hive begins to cry. People around them, doctors, scientists, civilians, every connected being within miles, begin to weep. Not scream, not seize, cry. And here's the critical detail. Zosia said earlier in episode 3 that physical substances don't transfer into the hive. If one drinks alcohol, the hive doesn't get drunk. If one drinks poison, the hive doesn't feel it. So why were they crying? Why were tears running down their faces as Zosia slipped away? The drug wasn't affecting them. Zosia's absence was. She wasn't dying. She wasn't injured. She wasn't disconnected by death. She was alive and leaving. For the first time since the joining, the hive felt a living mind being torn from them. A pain worse than death, worse than loss, worse than anything they'd ever experienced. The dead remain inside the hive. But Zosia, she wasn't dead. She was becoming alone, and they felt every second of it. The moment her heart stopped. Then Zosia collapses. Her heart stops. A single life-ending event. Not a collective death. Not a billion minds switching off at once. One body dies, and then comes back. Imagine a creature that has only ever known collective death, watching a single human heart fail. This wasn't biology. This was trauma. And then, the hive leaves. All of them. The entire city. Gone by sunrise. They say they needed space, but that's not the truth. They needed Zosia. Because in her disconnection, she showed them something no memory, no archive, no human history had ever shown them. The moment a collective cell becomes an individual cell again. A window into the very mechanism they'd been searching for. A key only Zosia could give. 3 days later, the answer. When they returned on day 12, they came with a revelation. Stem cells. Reprogram the biology. Switch the signal back on. Make the immune visible to the virus. Break the immunity. For 12 days, they had nothing. Then Carol's interrogation gave them everything. But they weren't happy. They weren't relieved. They were afraid. Why? Because for the first time, the hive found a method they couldn't use. The hive's first limitation. The hive cannot harm living things. Not won't. Can't. It's structural, fundamental, as natural to them as breathing is to us. They couldn't pluck fruit from trees. They freed zoo animals. They avoid stepping on insects. The original virus spread without intention, through contact, biology, chaos. The deaths were collateral, not deliberate. But stem cell extraction? That requires a needle, pressure, bone pain, direct harm. Something the hive is literally incapable of performing. Unless Carol asks for it. Because if Carol consents, the meaning of pain changes. It becomes assistance, not harm. Consent doesn't grant permission. Consent alters the nature of the act. The real nightmare. But here's the twist nobody wants to talk about. Carol might not matter. Her consent might not matter. Because years ago, Carol froze her eggs. They're not part of her body anymore. And by the hive's strict moral logic, what's separated from the body is fair game. Just like fallen apples. They could fertilize those eggs, create embryos, harvest the stem cells, all without touching Carol, all without harming her, all without requiring consent. The material to convert her, the life preserver, might already exist in a freezer the hive knows about through Helen's memories. And Zosia is no longer the one drowning. Because the terrifying possibility is this. Zosia experienced individuality. She felt the cold, the silence, the loneliness. And when the hive reached out their hand, she chose to return. What does that mean for Carol? For the immune, for the future of humanity?